Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Screeny. It's no secret Chumlee isn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but he actually made a couple of smart choices along the way. This pawn star came across dozens of rare, valuable, and interesting items and managed to get its hands on some of them. Let's take a look at every time Chumlee hit the jackpot. Before we remind you of some of his brightest moments, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more amazing videos every day. Number 10. Comic book collection. Chumlee is a casual fan of comic books, and every time someone walks into the store trying to sell one, his face immediately lights up. His excitement was limitless after one customer showed up with a whole collection, which belongs to her uncle who recently passed away. She had a total of 7 boxes, but didn't have any time to go through them and check if they're actually valuable. Chumlee didn't feel like calling in an expert and started negotiating the price without knowing if the store is going to make any profit. He bought the comics for $500 and hopes this purchase will show everyone what he's made of. When an expert came in, it turned out that the comics aren't that rare, and Rick wasn't impressed by the whole thing. Fans of the show felt that this was just another one of those scripted scenes purposely made to make Chumlee look like a fool. The sheer volume of this collection made it pretty valuable, as most of the comics could make a good buck through impulse buys. Number 9. 985 Harley-Davidson. Having friends who are ready to go an extra mile to make you happy is the biggest jackpot you can hit, and Chumlee realized he found them in the Harrison family on his 30th birthday. In the beginning, it seemed like they've all completely forgotten about his special day, and constantly kept ignoring his hints and kept him busy with boring tasks. Chum was hurt by their behavior, and only wanted to make it home after a long day, but the old man told him he has to clean up the warehouse before leaving. He was sick and tired of everything at that point, but his mood completely changed once he actually entered the warehouse. All of his friends were gathered there to surprise him, and his best buddy Corey invested a lot of time and money into the present he specifically picked out for Chum. He bought him a 1985 Harley-Davidson FXR and had Danny Coker restore it. The birthday boy was head over heels after seeing it, especially once the gang told him that he can join them when they go riding together. Number 8. 1930s pinball machine. Outsmarting the old man is pretty much impossible, and Chum certainly felt like he hit the jackpot after doing it for the first time ever. The veteran store owner had to admit his fellow pawn star knows a thing or two after a guy tried to sell them a vintage pinball machine from around the 30s. Richard Sr. wasn't impressed by the piece because it didn't have any flippers, but his young employee didn't feel the same way. Chumlee gloated after explaining flippers haven't been introduced until the 50s and told the guy it's unreasonable to expect $5,000 in return. His pinball machine was pretty rare, but it wasn't in mint condition, and the old man wasn't ready to meet him halfway. He drove a hard bargain and bought it for $1,000. At the end of the day, it was a team effort, since he would have thought it was fake if it wasn't for Chum. Number 7. 1986 Buick Regal. Being an impulsive buyer doesn't really come in handy when you're working at a pawn store, but it's all fun and games as long as you're spending your own money. The pawn stars are also passionate collectors, and they sometimes keep certain items for themselves. That's exactly what Chum did when one guy tried to sell his vintage Buick Regal from 1986. Corey didn't want to meet his price, but when he reached out to shake the seller's hand, his best friend stopped him. He agreed to pay $2,000 out of his pocket to become the new owner of this impressive vehicle, and took it to Danny Coker's shop to juice it up and make it bounce. Number 6. Nike Air Jordans. Chumlee has been collecting sneakers for years and currently owns more than 200 pairs. In other words, he's something of an expert, so it's safe to say he can tell the difference between a fake and the real deal. He's particularly fond of Air Jordans and is constantly looking for a good new pair to add to his collection. At one point, he came face to face with a customer who was trying to sell his vintage kicks for no less than $500. The buyer claims they came out back in the 90s, but Chumlee realized they were actually a 2009 model. After learning it wasn't a vintage piece, Corey wasn't interested in buying the item since he's not running a shoe store. Chumlee, on the other hand, couldn't resist an opportunity to enrich his collection with another killer pair. He cashed out $75 from his own pocket, but some viewers felt he ripped off this poor guy because he could easily sell them for a few $100 elsewhere. Number 5. Salvador Dali sculpture. You don't get a great work of art coming into your pawn shop every day, so you must do everything in your power to get your hands on one when it finally happens. Chumlee and Olivia were pretty impressed when a lady walked into the store claiming she had a silver sculpture created by the legendary surrealist Salvador Dali. The only problem? She didn't have any paperwork proving it's a Dali, apart from his signature that could have easily been faked. The lady hopes that she would get $1,500 in return, but her time was running out. Chumlee wanted Rick or one of the experts to check out the sculpture, but she couldn't wait that long. They eventually settled for $600, but Chum was aware it was a risky move to take since he didn't know if the item was authentic or not. Rick was furious after hearing how much money the duo spent on this sculpture, especially after it turned out it wasn't a real Dali. Fortunately, it still was an interesting decorative piece that they could sell for up to $1,000. Number 4. Handcuff collection. When you work at a pawn shop, you get to see a lot of weird stuff over the years. After a while, you start feeling there's nothing in this world that could possibly shock you, until you come across a customer with a really weird hobby. Corey and Chumlee were a little lost at first when a guy tried to sell them an old set of handcuffs he collected over the years. After taking a closer look at them, the duo came to the conclusion they may be pretty valuable if they find the right buyer. They weren't willing to make a purchase before calling in an expert, and the seller agreed to wait a little bit since he had nothing to hide. The magic expert Murray Sawchuck, who knows a thing or two about handcuffs, was super impressed by this collection. He told Corey and Chum that these items are very collectible, and they were ready to cash out $8,100. Number 3. Vintage Cracker Jack toys. Hitting the jackpot isn't always about buying an item that will sell for thousands of dollars. It's also about making those around you happy. And that's exactly what Chumlee wanted to do when one customer tried to sell him a set of Cracker Jack toys. Chum was pretty impressed by his collection because it featured a wide range of trinkets that he really liked. He wanted to buy it for a very special reason: to make the old man happy. Chum knew how much the late Richard Harrison loved vintage toys and hopes that this set will be a pleasant surprise. The buyer was hoping to get $100 in return, but Chumlee explained he couldn't give him more than $45 because the toys looked pretty beat up. The old man thanked him and said he appreciated the gift, but told Corey to put them on the shelf for $80 a few seconds later. Chumlee was no longer around by that point and walked away thinking he finally made the old man proud. Number 2. Saw handle pistols. No matter how much you like Chumlee, there's no point in denying one thing: he's the biggest screw up on the set of Pawn Stars. He's constantly breaking things, ignoring orders, and making terrible deals, but every once in a while, he makes us think there's some hope left for him. After the owner of this vintage nickel-plated Scottish pistols asked him to cash out $8,000 for his 175-year-old model, Chum finally did the right thing. Instead of geeking out, he made it clear the pistols were too rusty to be worth that much, and asked Alex Cranmer to take a closer look. Chum hopes they'd have at least some historical significance, and it turned out he finally hit the jackpot. The pistols were a creation of Alexander Henry, the renowned gunmaker from the Victorian era. After tense negotiations, the seller agreed to let go of them and accepted a $3,300 payout. To make the whole story even more exciting, they turned out to be one of the best buys of Chum's career after selling for $42,000 at an auction. Number 1. Japanese Katana. The Pawn Stars featured a couple of pretty fun celebrity cameos, and one of them led to the biggest sales of Chum's career. Shortly after Rick's Japanese Katana returned to the store after a 2-year-long restoration process, a very special buyer expressed an interest in this precious item. The UFC president Dana White agreed to cash out $30,000 after hearing Rick was crazy about it. and the big boss wasn't too happy to learn that Chumlee sold his favorite sword. He was so furious after hearing someone dare to mess with him and decided to meet this bold buyer in person. Rick immediately changed his tune after learning it's Dana White and decided to make him an offer he couldn't refuse. He sold him another traditional katana for $9,000, but that still wasn't enough to steal Chumlee's thunder. He was the one who made the biggest sale of the day, since he managed to convince White to splash out an additional $30,000 for another set of katanas he could use to decorate his weapon room. Thank you very much for watching today's video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing content, and don't forget to check out one of the other 2 videos on your screen.